Sophia approached the front door of Mr. Johnson's house and knocked. She waited, but there was no answer. She knocked again, louder this time, hoping Johnson would hear. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open slightly. A middle-aged woman peered out. "This must be Mr. Johnson's wife," Sophia said in her mind. "Hello," Annabelle greeted. She immediately recognized her as the loud lady she saw at the salon, her husband's side chick. "Is Mr. Johnson here?" Sophia asked, not minding she was standing in front of Mr. Johnson's wife. Mrs. Johnson sighed heavily and nodded. "Yes, he's here. You can come inside." Sophia stood in the sitting room, her presence a stark reminder of Mr. Johnson's infidelity. Annabelle had let her in, fully aware of who she was. Mr. Johnson's eyes widened in shock as he entered the sitting room. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" he demanded. Sophia smiled, her eyes gleaming with a knowing glint. "I came to see you, Mr. Johnson." Mr. Johnson's gaze darted to Annabelle, who was watching the scene unfold. He took a step back, his eyes pleading with Sophia to leave. "You shouldn't be here, Sophia." Annabelle's eyes flicked to Sophia, her gaze lingering for a moment before returning to her husband. "Oh, Sophia just dropped by for a visit, dear," she said, her voice sweet and innocent. Sophia smiled, her eyes locked on Mr. Johnson. "That's right, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd say hello." "Can I get you some juice, Sophia?" Annabelle asked, her voice dripping with false hospitality. Sophia's smile grew wider as she accepted the offer, her eyes never leaving Mr. Johnson's face. The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with secrets and deception. Annabelle left to the kitchen to get a cup of juice for Sophia, smiling all through. Her smile seemed too suspicious, and Mr. Johnson's face grew more tense with each passing second. As soon as Annabelle was out of earshot, he leaned in towards Sophia, his voice low and urgent. "Sophia, you need to leave this house immediately," he whispered, his eyes darting towards the kitchen. "My wife is up to something. She knows who you are." "No, I won't leave," she said firmly. "You caused this, Johnson. Why did you abandon me like that? You left me with no explanation." Mr. Johnson's face contorted with guilt. "Sophia, just leave first. I never meant for it to go this far." "Really?" she asked. "By leaving me without a word? You have no idea what I went through. I need money to sort out some things, and I need it urgently." "Please, Sophia," Johnson pleaded, glancing nervously towards the kitchen. "Just go now. I promise I'll see you later, but right now, you need to leave." Sophia took a deep breath, her emotions in turmoil. She could see the genuine fear in Mr. Johnson's eyes, and despite her anger, she knew she had to leave there. Mr. Johnson's wife must be up to something no good. She nodded reluctantly. "Fine, I'll go," she said quietly. "But you better keep your promise, Johnson." Mr. Johnson nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, Sophia. Now go out the back door. Hurry." As Sophia quietly made her way to the back door, she glanced one last time at Mr. Johnson, his eyes filled with urgency. Then he gently closed the door behind her. Annabelle returned to the sitting room with a glass of juice in her hand, expecting to find both Mr. Johnson and his visitor still engaged in conversation. Instead, she found only Mr. Johnson, who appeared unusually tense. "Where's your visitor?" she asked casually. Mr. Johnson, caught off guard, began to stammer. She just left. She got an urgent call and had to go." Annabelle raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "All right," she said, turning to leave the sitting room. As she turned, Mr. Johnson's heart raced. Why hadn't she asked more questions? Why didn't she seem curious about Sophia? Panic set in as his thoughts spiraled. "Aren't you going to ask who Sophia is?" he blurted out, his voice shaking slightly. Annabelle stopped and slowly turned back to face him. Her expression was calm, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes now. "All right, who is Sophia and what brought her here?" she asked, her voice measured and composed. Mr. Johnson swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew he had to tread carefully. "Sophia is an old colleague from work. We hadn't seen each other in years, and she wanted to catch up. It was nothing more than that, I promise." Annabelle's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied his face. "An old colleague? And you didn't mention her before because—" "I didn't think it was important," he said quickly, his voice betraying his anxiety. "It was a surprise visit, and it didn't seem like a big deal." Annabelle gave him one last searching look before turning to leave again. As she walked away, Mr. Johnson couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was far from resolved. Annabelle's laughter echoed through the bedroom, her eyes shining with amusement. She had been playing a clever game, pretending ignorance of her husband's infidelity, while secretly watching him squirm. The tension in the sitting room had been palpable, and she had reveled in every moment of it. As she lay on the bed, she couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Sophia, the side chick, had walked into their home unaware of the dynamics at play. And Johnson, her husband, had been so desperate to keep his secrets hidden that he had almost pushed Sophia out of the house. But wait, why did she leave all of a sudden? Were they thinking I poisoned the juice? Oh no, I didn't poison the juice. I mean, Johnson needs his side chick by his side now more than ever. Annabelle's laughter subsided, replaced by a sly smile. She knew that Sophia was exactly what Joseph needed right now, a loyal girlfriend to stand by him in his time of need. And she was happy to oblige, if only to see how far this charade would play out. With a flick of her wrist, Annabelle dismissed the scene from her mind and turned her attention to more pressing matters. She had a plan, and it was only just beginning to unfold. The game was afoot, and Annabelle was ready to play. Mr. Johnson sat on the couch, sweating profusely, trying to calm himself after the tension from just minutes ago. How could Sophia come to his house, knowing full well his wife was home? The worst part was, she came because she needed money. She always wanted money. Does she want to break my marriage or what? He thought back to the sack letter he received a few days ago. It was because of his lack of concentration at work, but who could blame him? He had lost all his money to hackers, and that stress had seeped into every part of his life. He had been unfocused, distracted, and now he was jobless. The pressure was mounting and his thoughts raced. He had to find a way to break up with Sophia before things got further out of hand. His wife could have found out today. The risk was too high and his life was spiraling. He stood up, wiped the sweat from his brow, and took a deep breath. He needed a plan. He needed to end things with Sophia immediately and start rebuilding his life. Johnson stood in the kitchen, holding the pot of soup he had just prepared, his stomach growling in anticipation. The tantalizing aroma of the soup filled the air, a testament to his determination to fend off his hunger. However, his moment of triumph was abruptly interrupted when Annabelle stormed into the kitchen, her eyes blazing with anger. "Who bought the items you used in making the soup?" she demanded, snatching up a wooden spoon and brandishing it like a weapon. "So you can even cook? How much did you contribute to buying these foodstuffs?" Johnson fell backward, trying to dodge the weapon, and startled by her sudden fury. "Annabelle, I was just hungry. You've been gone all day and there was nothing to eat. I had no money to buy food, so I used what was here." "That's not the point, Johnson," she snapped, her grip tightening on the spoon. "You didn't contribute a single penny towards these groceries. You just take and take without considering the effort and money I put into this household." "When last did you bring money in this house? I'm asking you, Johnson. How could you, Johnson? How could you let us suffer while you chased after your own selfish desires?" Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and pain. "We needed you, and you weren't there, and now look where we are." "Annabelle, please, I'm very hungry. Just pardon me this time. I promise I won't do this again." Annabelle lowered the wooden spoon and left the kitchen. Johnson was astonished. He had never seen Annabelle this angry and fierce before. Her eyes blazed with a fury that made him realize the depth of his failures. She was right. He hadn't been contributing to the household needs when he had the means. Instead, he had foolishly lavished his attention and resources on Sophia, neglecting Annabelle and their children. Now, the tables had turned. The money was gone and he was left with nothing but regret. Annabelle's voice cut through his thoughts, each word a sharp reminder of his neglect. Johnson hung his head in shame. The reality of his actions weighed heavily on him. He had been blind to the needs of his family, and now he was reaping what he had sown. His children now avoided his gaze like he was a total stranger. "I know I've made terrible mistakes. I was foolish and selfish. God, please give me a chance to make things right." Johnson called Sophia and told her he was coming to see her. Sophia was happy that her drastic action has worked. If I hadn't gone to his house, he wouldn't have thought of seeing me. She was happy. She was going to bill him, and he would pay without a second thought, like he always does. Johnson got to her house and, to her greatest surprise, he told her it was over between them. He had neglected his family all these years because of her, not minding what they were going through, especially his wife. He wasn't ready to continue cheating on her anymore. Sophia stared at Johnson, her eyes wide with disbelief. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as his words echoed in her mind. "What are you saying, Johnson? You must be joking, right? Just tell me you are joking." Johnson shook his head, his expression solemn and unyielding. "I'm not joking, Sophia. It's over. I can't keep living this lie. I can't keep hurting my family, especially my wife, for something that should never have started." Sophia's face twisted with anger. "After everything we've been through, after all the promises you made, you're just going to throw it all away for her?" "It's not about making promises. It's about doing the right thing. I've neglected my responsibilities, my vows. I need to make amends and be the husband and father they deserve." Sophia clenched her fists, struggling to keep her voice steady. "So that's it? You think you can just walk away and everything will be fine? What about me? What about us?" "There is no us," Johnson replied firmly. "There never was. It was an affair, Sophia, a mistake that went on for too long. I can't keep living this way, and neither should you." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away, unwilling to show weakness. "And you think you can just end it like this? Just like that?" Johnson looked at her. "I have to, for my own sanity and for my family's sake. You deserve better than this too. You deserve someone who can give you their all, not just stolen moments." Sophia shook her head, her voice rising. "You can't just leave me like this." Johnson's expression softened, but his resolve did not waver. "I'm sorry, Sophia, I truly am, but this is the end." With that, Johnson turned and walked away, leaving Sophia standing there, her world collapsing around her. She felt a mixture of rage, sorrow, and desperation. As the door closed behind him, she realized she had lost. She fell onto the couch, her mind racing. She had been so certain that her drastic actions would secure her place in Johnson's life, but now everything had backfired. She had risked everything and ended up with nothing. In the silence of her empty house, Sophia vowed that this wasn't the end. She would find a way to make Johnson regret his decision. One way or another, she would make him pay. Annabelle's transformation began subtly. At first, she simply updated her wardrobe with a few new outfits, claiming she wanted to feel more confident and vibrant. Johnson, her husband, didn't initially mind the changes. However, as the weeks went by, Annabelle's choices in clothing became increasingly daring. One Saturday morning, Annabelle emerged from their bedroom in a short, form-fitting gown that clung to her figure. Johnson, sitting in the sitting room, glanced up and nearly choked without anything in his mouth. "Annabelle, where are you going dressed like that?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm but unable to hide the edge of disapproval. "I'm just meeting some friends for brunch," she replied nonchalantly, adjusting her hair slightly. "Don't you know you're a married woman? Why would you dress like that?" Johnson pressed, his concern now mingled with anger. Annabelle paused, turning to face him. "I know exactly who I am, Johnson. I'm Annabelle, and sometimes I just want to feel good about myself. It's not a crime to dress nicely." "Nicely? That dress is practically—" Johnson stopped himself, realizing his words were teetering on outright condemnation. "Annabelle, people will talk. They'll think what they want to think," she interrupted. "I can't live my life based on other people's opinions." Despite his objections, Annabelle grabbed her purse and headed out the door, leaving Johnson staring after her, bewildered and increasingly angry. But what can he do? Annabelle's outfits varied from tight trousers that accentuated her legs to tops that left little to the imagination. Each time she dressed up, Johnson would question her, and each time, Annabelle would give him the same response. She was going out, and that was all that mattered to her. Johnson's unease grew. He couldn't understand what had caused this dramatic shift in Annabelle. They had been married for years, and though he had always been the boss, and whatever he says stands, this new boldness seemed out of character. One evening, after a particularly tense confrontation where Annabelle had worn a sleek black dress to a friend's dinner party, Johnson decided he needed to get to the bottom of it. "Annabelle, can we talk?" he asked as she returned home, her face still glowing from the evening's events. "Sure," she said, kicking off her heels and collapsing onto the couch. What's going on? This isn't like you. Why the sudden change? Annabelle sighed, the excitement in her eyes dimming slightly. I guess I just got tired, Johnson. Tired of feeling invisible. And somewhere along the way, I felt like I lost a part of myself. Dressing like this, it makes me feel alive again. Johnson sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. I understand wanting to feel good about yourself, but you don't need to dress like this to be seen. You've always been beautiful to me. It's not about you, Annabelle said gently. It's about me finding myself again. I need this. Johnson's mind raced with thoughts of Annabelle's possible infidelity, his own guilt and shame festering like an open wound. He thought in his mind that Annabelle was hiding something from him, that her sudden change in behavior and dress was not ordinary. As he lay in bed that night, he couldn't sleep, his mind consumed by visions of Annabelle in the arms of another man. The thought was unbearable, and he knew he had to do something. The next morning, Johnson approached Annabelle with a mix of trepidation and determination. Annabelle, we need to talk, he said, his voice laced with anxiety. Annabelle looked up from her breakfast, a hint of amusement in her eyes. What's this about, Joseph? I know I've been unfaithful, Annabelle. I've been a terrible husband, but I can't bear the thought of you with someone else. Are you seeing another man? Annabelle's expression changed, her eyes softening with a hint of pity. Joseph, my dear husband, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You're finally willing to confront your own demons. But are you prepared to tell the truth? Johnson accepted he was possessed by a demon to have acted the way he acted. How could he neglect his own wife and kids just like that? Where's your side chick, Johnson? She should be by your side now that everything in your life has turned upside down, don't you think so? Annabelle asked. To be honest with you, Johnson, I'm done with this marriage. You made me lose myself. You made me think I wasn't good enough. You made me feel less confident. Do you even know what cheating does to a woman? It will drain you emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally. You betrayed the love I had for you, and I don't think I can continue with you anymore. Then she stood up and left. The room felt colder, emptier without her presence, and the weight of his actions pressed down on him like a physical burden. How had he allowed his life to spiral so far out of control? The affair with Sophia had been a reckless attempt. He thought it was excitement he was seeking, but it had only brought chaos and destruction. I don't even know who I am anymore, Johnson whispered to himself. He recalled the moments of anger, the times he had lashed out or simply withdrawn into himself, neglecting the family he once cherished. Was he truly possessed by a demon, as Annabelle had said? It felt like it. The shadow that had overtaken his thoughts and actions was unlike anything he recognized as himself. He was terrified to admit it, but there were times he couldn't recall his own actions, as if someone else had taken the reins. Mr. Johnson stood nervously in the living room of his in-laws' house. Annabelle's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert, sat on the couch across from him, their faces evident of shock and anger as they listened to his confession. I know I've made terrible mistakes, Mr. Johnson said. I neglected Annabelle and got involved with someone else, but I've realized how wrong I was. I've changed and I desperately want to make things right. Mrs. Gilbert's eyes welled up with tears, but she remained silent, waiting for her husband to speak. Mr. Gilbert's face, however, was turning red with anger. You mean to tell me that my daughter endured all this in silence? He thundered. She suffered while you betrayed her with another woman, and she didn't breathe a word of it to us. How dare you come here asking for our help after abandoning your family for someone else? Johnson hung his head in shame. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, he said quietly. But I love Annabelle and our children. I want to be a better husband and father. Please help me convince her to give me another chance. Mrs. Gilbert finally spoke up. What assurance do we have that you won't hurt her again? Trust isn't something that can be easily rebuilt, especially after such a betrayal. I've understood my mistakes and become a better person. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to win back Annabelle's trust. There was a long silence as Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert exchanged a look. Mr. Gilbert's anger had not completely subsided, but there was a sign of consideration in his eyes. I will talk to Annabelle, he said finally. But this is her decision. If she decides to give you another chance, you'll have to prove to her and to us that you've truly changed. Mr. Johnson nodded, gratitude flooding through him. Thank you, he said. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I won't let you down. Annabelle sat on the worn yet familiar couch in her parents' living room, her children playing quietly nearby. The soft murmur of their laughter was a comforting background to the conversation unfolding. Her mother, Mary, gently placed a hand on her shoulder, while her father, Gilbert, leaned forward, his eyes filled with concern and hope. Annabelle, Gilbert began, his voice steady and warm. Johnson was here earlier today. He pleaded for forgiveness. He seemed sincere, and I believe he truly regrets his mistakes. Maybe you should find a way to forgive him. Mary nodded in agreement, her eyes softening as she looked at her daughter. I know it's hard, dear, but I have a strong feeling that Johnson has changed. He's still the father of your children, and perhaps he deserves another chance. Annabelle's heart tightened. She had been through so much, and the pain Johnson caused was still raw. Never, she replied firmly, shaking her head. I can't forgive him, not after everything he's done. It's not just about me, it's about protecting my children from a toxic background and their mental health. Her parents exchanged a glance, understanding the depth of her hurt. They knew it wasn't a decision to be made lightly, but they also saw the potential for healing and reconciliation. Sweetheart, her father said softly, forgiveness isn't just for him. It's for you too. Holding on to all that anger and pain can weigh you down. You deserve to be free from it. Annabelle looked at her father. She wanted to believe that forgiveness could bring peace, but the scars Johnson left were too deep. I can't, Dad, I just can't. Mary squeezed her daughter's hand, offering silent support. We understand, Annabelle. We'll stand by you no matter what. But remember, forgiveness is a process. It doesn't have to happen all at once. Annabelle nodded, feeling a sense of relief knowing her parents were on her side. Thank you. I just need time. Johnson had spent many sleepless nights haunted by the weight of his actions. He could no longer ignore the pain he had caused Annabelle and their children, the family he had once vowed to cherish and protect. The guilt gnawed at him, each day a painful reminder of the trust he had shattered. He stood up, got prepared, and headed to his in-laws' house again. Johnson found Annabelle sitting by the window. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, now seemed distant and weary. Taking a deep breath, Johnson approached her. Annabelle, he began, his voice trembling. She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. Please, I'm sorry. She remained silent, waiting. Johnson knelt before her, the gesture feeling both humbling and necessary. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. I am so sorry, he whispered. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to tell you how deeply sorry I am for everything I've done. For all the lies, the betrayal, the pain I've caused you. Annabelle's gaze softened slightly, but she said nothing. Johnson continued, his voice breaking. I realize now how foolish and selfish I was. I should have done better. Tears began to stream down Annabelle's face. Johnson reached out, but she pulled back, her eyes flashing with the hurt she had kept inside for so long. You broke us, Johnson. You broke me. How can I trust you again? I don't expect you to trust me right away, Johnson admitted, his voice hoarse with emotion. But I am willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I will be there for you and the kids in every way. I love you, Annabelle, and I am so deeply sorry for everything. Annabelle helped him stand, her eyes welling up with tears as she looked at him. His face was a mixture of relief and anticipation, waiting for her next words. She took a deep breath and with a small smile said, I forgive you, Johnson. In an instant, Johnson's face lit up with pure joy. He rushed to her, enveloping her in a tight embrace, his gratitude spilling over in whispered thanks. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you for giving me another chance. I promise you, I will be the best father and husband. I won't let you down. As they held each other, Johnson gently pulled back to look into her eyes. And there's more, he said, his voice filled with excitement. I've gotten a new job, a better one. This means a fresh start for us, for our family. Annabelle's tears of relief turned into tears of joy. They laughed and cried together, overwhelmed by the wave of emotions. Feeling a surge of happiness, Johnson swept her off her feet and carried her up. The next morning, in Mr. Johnson's house, Johnson and his wife, Annabelle, were still wrapped in each other's arms in their cozy sitting room, relishing the peaceful morning together. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. Annabelle, curious and a bit surprised, got up to answer it. To her shock, she saw Sophia standing there, looking as smug as ever. Before Sophia could say a word, Annabelle's rage erupted. She bounced at Sophia, unleashing a rush of blows on her face. "How dare you step into my house, you desperate harlot!" Hearing the commotion, Johnson rushed out and quickly pulled Annabelle away from Sophia. He held his wife firmly but protectively, calming her down. Turning his icy gaze to Sophia, he issued a stern warning. "Listen, Sophia," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "You are never to set foot in this house again. You're a demon sent to destroy my family, but you failed. If I ever see you around here again, I'll have you arrested." Sophia, shaken and bruised, could see the seriousness in Johnson's eyes. Without another word, she stumbled away from the doorstep, knowing she had crossed a line she should never have approached. Annabelle, still fuming but feeling vindicated, leaned into Johnson's embrace, grateful for his unwavering support. Together they watched as Sophia disappeared down the street, determined to protect their home from any further intrusions.